Oh, hey, I'm glad you're able to join us tonight. It's good to see you. I'm really excited to be able to get into tonight's lesson. It's going to be amazing as we continue this series on the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, showing the biblical narrative to be true. Just it's so exciting to be able to get into it. Let's go ahead and check out this video. Are the events in the Bible true? Are they historic facts? Or are they merely legend? Does the historical record show the Bible to be true? Or is it filled with fantasy? In this series, we are going to uncover the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, showing that the Bible is indeed historic fact. This is Unearthing the Bible. Hey, welcome back. For thousands of years, mankind has been moved by the biblical events of creation, Adam and Eve, the story of the flood, and the early patriarchs. But are these stories true? Is there extra biblical evidence for these people, places, and events? Last week we discovered 5 tablets of the earliest accounts of the creation narrative and flood. Last week we covered the Gersu and Ebla tablets. And these tablets showed us that though they had this ancient tradition, this ancient oral tradition, how these stories had been passed down from generation to generation and eventually ended up on these amazing tablets, and how God created everything that was passed down through the ages. And then we have also covered other tablets that were called the Enuma, Elish, and the Enki tablets. And these tablets included everything from creation of lesser gods, who we Judeo-Christians would say are not gods at all, but were merely angels, to the creation of man from clay with divine infusion. Now, we as Christians know that the story of creation is true because it was given by divine revelation to Moses from the only one who was actually an eyewitness. And of course, that eyewitness would be Yahweh, God. Then we had also covered the Atra, Hasis, and the Epic of Gilgamesh tablets. Now, in these particular tablets, so many specific details match the flood story of Noah that were found in Genesis. We see that, the gods, like the story in Genesis, the gods wanted to destroy all humanity by a flood. And then we see in this Gilgamesh and this other Matra story that one of these gods warns a man about the flood that's coming and instructs him to build a boat. And then we've seen in this story that the dimensions were given for a massive boat to be built that had multiple decks and different aspects. And then we also saw the animals were to be taken into this boat 2 by 2, according to this ancient flood story. And then we see that there was this huge storm that rages, and the entire world, it floods. And then the boat comes and lands on a mountain. And the survivors offer a sacrifice to the God who saves them. Now, even though these stories show a creation flood account with many similarities, they are not entirely the same as the biblical narrative, which really is to be expected. Because these stories, they were handed down through what's called the oral tradition. And if you've ever played the game telephone, you know that through time, the story changes. And they would also adopt the story to incorporate their local belief system. But what they do show us is that the similarities all stem from actual events. That these stories, these flood stories, they actually stem from an actual historical event. Now today we're going to discover some more pre-flood and post-flood accounts. Really looking forward to tonight's lesson to get into it. So let's go ahead and take a moment and read our main verse for this first discovery. And this is found in Genesis chapter 7, verse 6. Now, Noah, this is what it says, now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Could you imagine being 600 years old? Man, I thought Yoda, was getting old. So I can't believe, what would you look like at 600? In our modern days, you'd look pretty bad. But in this time, 600, that's just such an interesting to see humanity was living pre-flood so long. Well, today we're going to be talking about the pre-flood world. And there's really not a lot of ancient discoveries about the pre-flood world, but there is a few. And one of them is called the Sumerian King List. And this is found on a prism. So it's called the Sumerian King List. Very fascinating. You're really going to enjoy this. But let me give you some of the basic information about this prism and about this Sumerian King List. The believed date for this list is about 2000 BC. And this particular prism was found in Larsa in Iraq. Now, this Sumerian king list prism really preserves a record of the kings of Sumer, from Sumerian culture. Now, this is found in their local and foreign dynasties and the different kings that are around them. And this included the lengths of their reign, and some beliefs and supplementary history information and stuff like that as well. Now, this particular prism shows, that is shown on our screen, is from about 1800 BC. And we know that this is about that timeline because one of the last kings named there, or the last king named there, is the name Sin Margur of Isin. So he reigned about the late 19th century BC, and he is the last Sumerian king that is on this prism. So we know that it's from about, this particular prism is from about 1800 BC. Now we know the oldest Sumerian kings list that is found is actually about 2000 BC, like I was saying earlier. Now, this particular prism is four-sided, and it measures about 8 inches tall and about 3.5 inches wide. And the clay was impressed with cuneiform, which we covered last week. And this is, of course, in the Sumerian language. Now, these cuneiform texts were very interesting because the cuneiform text here of the Sumerian kings list are unique in that they record the names and extremely long reigns of these kings before the Great Flood. Now, the first city where the kings ruled was also recorded here, and of course, there is even a brief mention of the flood or the deluge itself. Now, the reign of these, kings were measured in the Sumerian numeric system, and it is known as Sars, Nurs, and Sosis. Now, the text in this Sumerian king list begins very interesting. It begins like this. It begins with the words, "After the king descended from heaven." The kingship there was in Eridu. It's very interesting because they believe that from heaven the kings started to reign. Now, after this, it goes on to the list, and it lists 8 pre-flood rulers that had incredibly long lifespans, ranging from thousands of years, and then gradually getting smaller and smaller to modern lifespans. Now, archaeologically, Eridu at Tel Abu, Shahrain, has been considered the oldest city in Mesopotamia and possibly the oldest city in the world. Now, it has also been suggested that this is the location, or at least a possible location, for the Tower of Babel due to its status as the first known city, and because of the massive ancient ziggurat that is also constructed there. You might be thinking, what in the world is a ziggurat? Well, let me just show you. It might be a little bit easier than just explaining it to you. So please join me as we travel to ancient Mesopotamia. Hey, that was quick. We're here. Man, take a look around. Look at this amazing building that is behind me. It's just, awesome. Did you know that this behind me is the actual ziggurat that was restored? Now, of course, it wouldn't look like this. If you look at the old archaeological discovery and them undigging it and stuff, it was obviously in ruins and stuff. But they restored it to how they thought it would look. And that is an actual ziggurat. Let me scoot over a little bit. That right there is the actual ziggurat that was shown. Pretty amazing. I just says it's such an interesting look at what a ziggurat is. Now let's get back to our kings list for a moment. Although the long reigns in the Sumerian kings list really don't correspond to the calculation of years that we see in the Bible, or are the King's List is obviously dramatically inflated. But a comparison between the pre-flood and the post-flood reigns demonstrate that the Sumerians believed that the pre-flood kings had lifespans that were several times longer than those who lived after the flood. Now, of course, this is similar to the comparison between the pre-flood and post-flood lifespans that we see that are found in the Genesis narrative. Now, the Weld-Blundell prism, which is on the screen, is an ancient Mesopotamian source that was up to 600 years before Moses. And in it, we can see that there is a widespread thought that the Eridu was the first city, that it was a spread thought that this was the first city. And also that the people before the flood had extremely long lifespans. And that a flood reset civilization prior to 3000 BC. Now, this prism really shows us that there is an extra biblical record that records and shows that the events given by God to Moses are in fact true and historical. They are historical events. Now, here's something else that I think you might find very interesting. Did you know that there is over 200 stories from all over the world about a major flood event? If a worldwide flood never happened, then why are there so many stories talking about it? I think it's very interesting. Now I want to take you to another discovery. I want to take you to another biblical story that I think is a historical fact, and that is the Tower of Babel. Now, if you've been in Christianity, you might be thinking, well, is the Tower of Babel a real story? Did it really happen? Or are these just, myth or mythology? Are they just things that were just made up or legends? Well, I don't think they are. So let's go ahead and take a moment. And for this new discovery, we're actually going to read 9 verses from the book of Genesis. And it's going to be chapter 11, verse 1 through 9. And it states this: Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." And they used bricks instead of stones and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the faces of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that men were building. The Lord said, "If, as one people speaking the same language, they began to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. What I want to do now is show you another ancient tablet. And this is the story, and this is from multiple tablets actually. And this is the story of En-Makar and the Lord of Arata. And now some basic information about this discovery is that it's written around 2000 BC. And this is discovered in Nippur of Ur of Kish. Now, this is an ancient Sumerian story of Enmakar and the Lord of Aratta. Now, this story was composed most likely prior to 2000 BC and focuses on Enmakar, the king of Uruk, and his conflicts with an unnamed king of Aratta. Now, according to the Sumerian king list that we have covered earlier, the Enmakar probably ruled around 2600 BC or even earlier, making him one of the earliest known kings. Now, in the Sumerian epic about Enmakar, who was recorded as the founder of the city of Uruk, he attempted to build an Zu temple in the city of Eridu. Now, the text is a composite, really, of 27 currently known tablets and fragments discovered at least 3 different locations here in Mesopotamia. Now, archaeologically, Eridu, once again, is considered one of the earliest known cities in the world. And the Abzu temple, ziggurat, is the largest known. That is standing behind me as well. Even though it was unfinished, it is still a massive structure. Now, based on the Sumerian architecture and the method in which the largest tower temples and monuments were built in ancient world, the Tower of Babel was probably a massive ziggurat because of the time period, the location, and the people group. Most likely the Tower of Babel was this step type structure like you see behind me, where it goes up like a pyramid, but it goes up in steps. And it's very interesting. These ziggurats were designed as that, once again, that large step platform structures made from fired clay bricks and constructed with a temple at the very top as a house for the gods of heaven, or as a link between heaven and earth. You've seen a little correlation there? Now, in the Enmakar and the Lord of Aratta, the ruler Enmakar attempts to construct a giant ziggurat. Now, the building they were constructing, they also called, they didn't just call it those names, but they also called it this, a holy mountain, a temple brought down from heaven, a great shrine, and an abode for the gods, which indicates both its size and its function. See, in the temple worship at this time, they would have an incantation that was sung that all the people may address and lead in a single language. And the text states that the god Enki will change their speech in their mouths so that the speech of mankind is truly one. Now, this Sumerian epic reflects the knowledge of the Tower of Babel story. It really has so much tie-in with the Tower of Babel story, specifically with the building of a massive tower temple reaching towards the heavens in one of the first cities there in Mesopotamia. Obviously, there is a direct connection to the city of Erech or Uruk. And then the reference to the single language of humanity that came about as an act of divine intervention. Now, however, the story of Enmakar seems to be a partial reversal of the Genesis account. See, in its story, it says one of the gods changed the many languages back to one language, as it was before the Tower of Babel. And no record of the failure to complete the Tower Temple or of the dispersion of the people seemed to happen. So, we look at this and you can see that they had a complete partial reversal as they would go to their God, they would ask their God to make the many languages into a single language. So for at that time, Enki shall change the speech of their mouths, as many as he had placed there. And so the speech of mankind is truly one, is what it states. Now, we find in the writings of Josephus, which is a Jewish historian and a very respected Jewish historian, that the Tower of Babel had been attributed to Nimrod from the scriptures in antiquity because he established the city of Babel. And a few scholars have even suggested that there is a connection between Nimrod and Enmakar, because both were kings, both ruled over Uruk, and both are associated with a massive tower or ziggurat that would reach to the heavens. And the changing of human speech through divine intervention, even though they do a reversal in this particular narrative. So a lot of scholars believe that Enmakar is actually Nimrod. So there's a lot of correlations between the stories. It's pretty amazing. Now, although the timelines of all these details might not match exactly, and the story of Enmakar and the Lord of Arata appear to include knowledge, even though they might not exactly match, they appear to include the knowledge of the Tower of Babel event, although they are in an alternate version. So I want to go back to Scripture now, and I want to show you the details from Scripture of this particular account. And like we read earlier, but I'm going to shorten it down so you can see. So we're going to cover Genesis 10:10, and then go back to Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 through 7. But I'm going to just show you the details. I'm just going to read you the details real quick. So it states this: the beginning of Nimrod's kingdom was Babel and Erech. That's that same city that Enmakar was king of, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Now, let's skip down now. Now the whole earth used to be the same language and the same words. They used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar, the same as Enmakar. They said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches into the heaven." Let's skip down again. Then the Lord said, skipping down, "Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." I don't know about you guys, but that is so amazing to me. There's so many details between this ancient Sumerian story of Enmakar and Nimrod. I actually do. I think that they probably are the same person, or the oral tradition continued and the story of Tower of Babel was given to them and they were trying to reverse it because all the languages came from the Tower of Babel according to scripture. And from that, then they would be worshiping, and part of their incantation would be for having their God and Enki bring back all of humanity's language back to that single one. In either case, we know, like I said earlier, the telephone, that through time, the details kind of morph. And through time, these people would also adapt this story to their particular gods and culture. So I think that's what's happened to the Sumerians here. This is the story, the biblical narrative of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. And the Sumerians adapted the story to be their own people, to be their own gods, and to be their own narrative that ties it all together. Because some of those details are too much. And I just think it's amazing. So I hope you enjoyed this. So in closing, once again, going back to the Weld Blundell prism and the tablet of Enmakar, they really do show us that there are ancient extra-biblical records showing that the events given by God to Moses through divine revelation are in fact true historical events. And I just think that's amazing. And the further along in this series that we go, we will not be going back just simply to the ancient, Genesis accounts, but we will actually be getting into King David. Did King David exist? Did all these events around Jesus exist? And we're going to get into some of the discoveries throughout the entire biblical narrative, showing that in fact these are true events. Thank you for joining me today as we have traveled to the ancient ziggurat and unearthed the Bible. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.